listening to the Screeners Podcast Network.
From the big screen to the small screen and everything in between, this is the Screeners Podcast, where all media is appreciated, but none is safe.
Hello again, and welcome to a very special bonus episode of The Screeners. This is Chad.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Daniel.
And we are here today to talk about one thing and one thing only, and that is Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread. We know this movie came out back in 2017. It's made a lot of people's top 10 lists, but the linchpin for us deciding to do a bonus review is that of all the films that we saw last year, Josh actually saw this movie, and we wanted to get his perspective on all things Paul Thomas Anderson, and specifically the swan song for Daniel Day-Lewis. So with that, guys, let's jump right into our bonus review of The Phantom Thread.
You can sew almost anything into the canvas of a coat. When I was a boy, I started to hide things in the linings of the garments. Things that only I knew were there. Secrets.
Good morning.
Will you have dinner with me?
Reynolds has made my dreams come true, and I have given him what he desires most in return. Every piece of me.
Phantom Thread, the IMDb description reads, set in 1950s London, Reynolds Woodcock is a renowned dressmaker whose fastidious life is disrupted by a young, strong-willed woman, Alma, who becomes his muse and lover. It's directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. As Chad said, it stars Daniel Day-Lewis, Vicky Krieps, Leslie Manville, and it is nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and Supporting Actress. So, Josh did see this one. We are definitely going to start with Josh in our discussion of this. Paul Thomas Anderson directed There Will Be Blood and The Master. So I'm curious for you guys what your background is with his films, because he's definitely a different type of filmmaker. And this is kind of a different type of film. It's very much an Oscar film. You can kind of tell that caliber. It's a fall release, all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on Paul Thomas Anderson, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Phantom Thread. We'll start with you, Josh.
As Chad said, and now as you said, I'm just so happy and honored to be here for one of your special cinema bonus episodes.
As are we, Josh.
Yes, blessed.
I'm just happy to be here. So as for history, I am a huge Paul Thomas Anderson fan. Not the kind of fan who knows anything about the person, but the kind of fan who has seen most of their movies. You mentioned The Master and There Will Be Blood, and I had actually forgotten / not known that he had directed those. When I think Paul Thomas Anderson, I think Boogie Nights, which actually I need to go back and watch, but mostly Magnolia and Punch Drunk Love are the ones that are most in my mind. But I loved There Will Be Blood as well. There Will Be Blood, fun story, was my wife's and I first date.
It's a good date movie.
Yeah, it's barbecue and then milkshake drinking. Lots of milkshakes. I am a huge fan of P.T. Anderson's aesthetic and just the way he goes about constructing a story. Sometimes, like with Punch Drunk Love, it's a little bit cloudier in my memory because I feel like Punch Drunk Love was maybe his movie that kind of went off the rails the most as far as abstraction. But Magnolia is up there on my list of all-time favorites. And The Master and There Will Be Blood were fantastic as well. So, back to the movie at hand, I suppose. I had to see it because it was him, and because, like you said, it's supposed to be Daniel Day-Lewis's last movie as a working actor. What's going to happen?
Which is a tragedy, man.
It really is. But you think he's just toying with us, Daniel?
It could be.
Is he going to come back and do Cloverfield 4?
Yes, exactly. He's already done it. It's already filmed.
Yeah. I think he's in character now because his comeback movie is an actor that had retired. So he's just being method.
Phantom Thread is gorgeously shot, as you would expect, and it has I don't want to talk too much about it until I assume are going to do a spoiler segment as well on this. It has its moments that are a little confusing, but overall, without getting too personal, I have a bit of history being close to people who deal with mental issues that are similar to what this main character kind of deals with. And the way P.T. Anderson and Daniel Day-Lewis have nailed down the experience of living with someone like this is impeccable. And so the whole movie was, I don't want to say enjoyable for that aspect, but it was very well crafted from that point of view. And the story as a whole, I can take or leave the premise of fashion, because that's not really my thing. But this movie was all about the characters, and it was fantastic. And it's probably, I'm sorry I didn't see this before we did our top 10 list, because that would have definitely been 1 or 2 for me, I'm sure.
All right.
So thumbs up for me.
Yeah, 1 or 2. All right.
Very high praise from Josh.
Well, I saw 18 movies last year, as we might want to reiterate here.
19, Josh. You've
19
seen
now, that's true.
All right. Well, that's great to hear. So, Chad, what is your history with Paul Thomas Anderson and his films? And then what did you think of Phantom Thread?
Very much the same as Josh, as far as just being someone who is taken aback time after time with the craft that he consistently puts on display in all of his films. Boogie Nights, I knew the first time that I saw that was whoever made that. I think he was really young when he made that. I want to say he was like 27 or something like that. Knew what they were doing and was somebody to see, and it's just gotten better. I'm not as big a fan of There Will Be Blood as Josh is, but I am of The Master. I think The Master is just, and to get those performances and to create the sense of not wonder, but his movies aren't narratively what you would call coherent. I mean, he's not all necessarily interested in that. It feels more like being a part of poetry or an essay or something, and the feeling that you get is spending time with these characters is often more important than the story or the plot. And in this movie in particular, it's interesting, the angle that Josh, what he took away from it. I mean, with all art, everybody brings what they bring to the piece and take what they take based on your own experiences. And I can certainly see that side of it, and I'm very interested to hear Josh talk about that more in spoilers. But for me, I thought this talked a lot about a lot of different things, like the nature of desire and attraction and control and search for identity within a relationship. But again, not so, and I thought it was really very funny. I laughed out loud multiple times in this movie unexpectedly, not just at the characters themselves, but the situations and just the way that they act and the way that they antagonize each other at the central relationship. The atmosphere is couture fashion. It's lush and it's very evocative and interesting. Wasn't in my top 10 of the year, but probably because I need to see this movie. This is one of those movies that needs to be seen, 2 or 3 times to really kind of fully unpack it and appreciate it. And I will say, as much as I enjoy Daniel Day-Lewis, and he is the best of the best, I do agree that Vicky, is it Crepes or Creeps? I'm not sure how you...
I think it's Creeps, but that's a guess.
Crepes. This is her movie as far as I'm concerned. I think her performance is unbelievably good. This is one of those movies, it's interesting that the critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's like at a 92, and the audience score is a 69. And I think that's typical of any of PTA's movies, is that those that come in expecting kind of a traditional narrative or story are often left disappointed, but those that come in with an open mind to the experience of the emotion and the place of what he's presenting will often come away with something that's more satisfying. It's meticulous, it's exquisite. I mean, all the words that you can say, but not in a traditional sense. So I very much liked it. I didn't love it. For me, I don't think it's as good as The Master, but for what it is, I think it accomplishes a great deal, and I enjoyed it very, very much. How about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm with both of you guys. I think this is a very good movie. Like Chad, it wasn't in my top 10 of the year, but it wasn't my honorable mentions. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good movie. Let me real quick get any negatives out of the way because they're very few. My only minor complaint is just that this is a very deliberately paced movie that's very intentional. And it's just, it can make it, I don't know how to say, a little frustrating sometimes, just in the way in which it's paced. But it's very, like I said, it's very intentional. It's exactly how he wanted to make it. Other than that, this is a fantastic movie. I loved what you said, Chad, that it feels like being a part of poetry. I think that's so accurate and a beautiful way to put it because it feels so true. This isn't a strong narrative plot, really. It's about being in these people's lives and getting to know these characters, and more importantly, how they relate to each other and how they interact with each other. I think that this is the type of movie that can often be accused of being stuffy or pretentious, and I can understand maybe that perspective, but this is a very funny movie, just like Chad said. There's got some good laughs in it, and good sense of humor, and that's something I definitely did not expect going from the trailer to seeing the film. It's a lot funnier than you would ever think it should be, so I really appreciated that. It's just so well written as a whole. More than anything, what I loved is how honest it was, a portrayal of just, Josh said something about the way it portrays living with somebody with disorder or control or things like that, but I think it's just an honest portrayal of living with someone, period. The annoyances that can come. I think some of the things that Reynolds said at breakfast when he was annoyed with Alma are hilarious and so rude and so accurate to how I'm guilty of saying some of those annoyed things to my wife. If I'm in a bad, in a grumpy mood, then I'll be annoyed, and it was just so honest of what it looked like to be, living with other people, or when people are mad at the other or annoyed at the other. It was just I hadn't seen marriage or a relationship portrayed like that on screen before, so I thought that was very so well written and so interesting. It was great to see that relationship on screen. Chad said it exactly right about the performances. Daniel Day-Lewis is great, and normally when he's in a movie, you struggle to talk about anybody else, but that's just how good Vicky Krieps is. I mean, she is so good in this movie that I really thought more about her and her performance than I did at all about Daniel Day-Lewis, because she just was a revelation. She was so good and so different that she's one of my favorite performances of the year. I think she did fantastic. The film is really on her shoulders far more than it is on Daniel Day-Lewis's shoulders, and she carries it well, and she's raw and honest, and I thought fantastic. So as a whole, I really, really like this movie a lot. Like you guys said, beautiful imagery, lush costume design, and production design. This movie was fascinating and interesting and really great. So those are my thoughts. I actually realized I kind of skipped over. I didn't tell my thoughts on Paul Thomas Anderson. There are actually a few movies I didn't see of his. I haven't seen The Master, believe it or not, which I hear is amazing.
Oh, wow.
But I do love There Will Be Blood. That's love it. Love that movie quite a bit. That's easily my favorite of his films. But anyway, just want to throw that in before I forgot.
Magnolia? Have you seen Magnolia?
Yes, I like
Okay,
Magnolia. Good. I've only seen it one time, and it was many years ago. I remember really liking it, but not like being blown away or anything. But I'd love to watch that again.
Block off a few hours.
Yes.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's interesting to note, and I wanted to say this too, that obviously if you're listening to this, you're a podcast listener, and I want to suggest specifically a podcast called the Bill Simmons podcast. Not necessarily, you'd have to listen to any of his other stuff if you don't want to, but he does about a 2-hour or maybe an hour and 45-minute interview with PTA just about pursuing filmmaking his entire career, and it is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. And when you said Magnolia, Josh, it just made me think that Paul Thomas Anderson actually, what I took from this interview is he thinks that's probably, if he could, he doesn't want to redo it because it's in time, it's a snapshot of where he was at the time, but of all the films that he's done, he feels like that's the one that he made the most mistakes on and would like to go back and kind of course correct.
Really?
So, yeah, because he did Boogie Nights and had a lot of studio involvement, and then after that success, he could essentially do whatever he wanted to, and so on Magnolia, he talks about how he literally just did whatever he wanted to and regrets some of those decisions. I love Magnolia, but anyway, it's a very interesting interview, and I'd suggest everybody check that out.
Interesting. So it sounds like we are all in agreement on Phantom Thread, that it is a very good movie. Are there more thoughts you guys had before we jump into spoilers?
I think the score in this movie is phenomenal as well.
Mm-hmm.
I really loved the music very much. So I think it's worth checking that out as well.
Yeah, and it's Oscar nominated. Johnny Greenwood was nominated. He was famously deemed ineligible at the Oscars for his score for There Will Be Blood, because he kind of used pre-existing music. It wasn't original enough, kind of thing. And so there was a lot of pushback for that. Paul Thomas Anderson kind of took that personally and said that they were very involved in making sure that this score was going to be eligible for the Oscars. And it was. And so
and it's great. It's legitimately great.
Yeah, it is. It's a very good score. So it was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Supporting Actress, Costume Design, and Score. I just quick Oscar handicapping there. I think it's only going to win Costume Design. I think it doesn't have a shot at winning any of the others. But to not reward this film for being literally a movie about costume design, I think would be a huge mistake. So
Sure.
I do think that is going to win there. But without further ado, we are going to dive into spoilers for Phantom Thread.
The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
Well, you look nervous. Is it the scars? You want to know how I got them?
There's so many places it would never occur to Hawk to hide. However, the reason the Führers brought me off my Alps in Austria and placed me in French cow country today is because it does occur to me. Because I'm aware what tremendous feats human beings are capable of once they abandon dignity.
In the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead. He's fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he'd be there. And then I woke up.
So, Josh, you referenced that you had some specific things you wanted to talk about. So why don't you kick us off here?
Maybe it's not fair to call it confusion, but the biggest question I had, and I think maybe it was supposed to be an open question, was at the end, when do you think was his moment of realization of what was happening, and that he had decided to go through with it, and that this was what he wanted to do? When did he know that she was poisoning him again? Because I was under the assumption that he didn't know the first time that she had done it, and he just realized then. But I wasn't sure, like, is it when she looks at the book? Is it when she puts the butter in the pan? Is it when she brings the thing over and slaps it on his plate and he looks up at her? I don't know. It was an interesting scene.
Yeah, I read that scene as it was dawning on him the whole time, because he was watching her the whole time. So I think it was just the slow realization of, she's done this for me before. She's showing me this for a reason. And yeah, and looking at the book kind of cued it off as well. So I think it was just kind of a slow dawning.
Okay. For some reason, I just assumed there was a moment, but that explanation makes sense too.
I would say similarly. Yeah, I definitely don't think he knew the first time that she poisoned him, and I think that the back part of the movie, I think, gives us a little bit of foreshadowing relating to the idea that he realized that the first time that he was sick, he saw her in a different way when she took charge. I mean, you get that scene earlier where the lady at the event, where he makes her go take the dress off of her, and then she goes in and says, "You're not worthy of wearing the House of Woodcock," that whole kind of thing. I think those moments in his mind, he begins to see her as an equal as opposed to what she has been up to this point. And I think with the poisoning, when she is taking care of him and closes the door on her sister and the different things like that, I think coming out of that, his then, renewed creativity, he begins to see that as a necessary thing in his life, and that there's no one but her, I guess, that could do that. And so I think there are little crumbs along the way that suggest he knew a little earlier than that very last scene. But my read on it was that while they were there, he knew it the entire time. But again, there's nothing, I don't think, hard that says one way or the other.
Fair enough. I hadn't actually noticed any of the foreshadowing, but except the foreshadowing done for the audience, not for him.
Yeah. Well, so Josh, obviously not trying to get too personal here, but what were you referencing? You felt like maybe this was some sort of disorder that he has? I mean, because I've definitely heard and read some things about people also thinking that about his character, that it wasn't just the tortured genius and the muse, but that there was more there.
Yeah, I'm in no way qualified to say this. I'm not a psychologist, but sitting from the audience and as someone who has dealt with a little bit of this themselves, I would say at the very least he deals with some form of OCD, and you can tell that through his just incredibly structured routine, the fact that he can't and as Daniel was saying, this is relating this to just living with another person. I can see that side of it too, but just his things at breakfast when they would amplify the sound, every sound that this other person was making, because he was in his head and he spends breakfast in his head, and any interruption into that is just grating and amplified 1,000 times. And that's exactly how that works. And the line that just brought it all together and was like, this could have been pulled from different points in my life, was, if breakfast doesn't go well for him, it's very difficult to recover. And because that is totally accurate. That's kind of how that works. And then when she comes in, when he's working late at night up in the loft, I guess it is, and she comes in with tea, and he makes her turn around and leave, and she's like, all right, I'm leaving. And he says, but the interruption stays here.
I loved that line.
Yeah. No, it's just...
I'm so sorry, Josh. I'm so sorry.
No, I mean,
I'm specifically sorry because you were roommates with Chris, so I can't imagine the horrors.
Yes. Oh, if only he were here now to be speaking with us.
And
Chris is never going to see the Phantom Thread.
No, this is true.
I am one of those people who gets so annoyed by loud chewers as well. So every single scene with that was just so relatable, so accurate. I've never seen that depicted so, and not like a joke. You know, it was funny, but it wasn't like a goofy over the top. Like it was just kind of honest for somebody who gets annoyed by that kind of thing.
Right.
Like,
it's realistic. Yeah, I'm not trying to put all this on other people either. I have some of this swirling around my own head. So it's like, yes, you got it right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really that's what I like about the character too, because then when they're married and they're in the Alps on their honeymoon, she goes out of her way to exacerbate all of those things intentionally. And so number one, I view that as, like what you said, Daniel, it's the longer you're with someone, the things that were adorable when you were dating now make you want to punch them in the face.
Right.
And so, and then the other thing is, in this world where he treats the women and the people, specifically the women though, as commodities to dispose of at his whim, she, instead of bowing down to that, has chosen by whatever means necessary, including and up to poisoning him, to assert herself. And I don't think it's because she just wants her to love him. I think that because we don't really know a lot about her backstory or what her real motivations are. We know, or we think that we know, that she does love him. I think just in general, her character just is looking for her identity and her place in this, and feels as if she belongs and stands up to him. So I really viewed them as equals, and I think part of the journey, if there is one, of his character is his realization that she is in fact his equal as well, if there is a traditional story. Because outside of that, it really is just a lot of moment to moment little things. And I don't want to undersell, again, this movie's really funny. It really is funny.
Yeah, I think the whole thread throughout the movie of her being interviewed after the fact is, I'm not sure whether that's supposed to be after she's poisoned him once or twice. It almost seems like it's after the second time, because it seems like she's been with him for quite a while, and I feel like that is her character after fully realizing her place, and after fully realizing that she is the part that completes him and keeps the madness at bay.
And doing it through the line about that we heard in the trailer, just saying, by giving him every part of me. So even that subverts kind of what you think. And I think that's a lot of people. I know the couple that was sitting beside me when I went to see this. I didn't know them. They're an older couple. They definitely expected this to be more of a traditional romance because when the movie ended, the wife turned to the guy and said, "What was that?" And he said, "I don't know." And then they got up and walked out. So there you go.
That's how I expect the average viewing public to react to any P.T. Anderson movie, to be honest with you.
That's true. That is true.
Well, we all loved Phantom Thread, and we hope you love it too. Was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about while we're here in spoilers? If
you've listened this far, it's the same old, same old. These are the kinds of movies that you should support because there's not a lot out there like this, and I think there's something to find if you're willing to be open to the experience.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Awesome. So that about does it for our Phantom Thread bonus episode. Thanks so much for joining us. We love doing these bonus episodes, getting to talk about some special movies. Go ahead and follow us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at ScreenersCast and on Facebook. Search the Screeners Podcast. We want to hear from you guys, hear what you guys are watching and what you're thinking about. Join us next time for our review of the latest season of Black Mirror, as well as we'll talk about our most anticipated movies from the rest of 2018. We'll see you then.
And that's a wrap. You've heard what the screeners had to say. Now you be the critic. Head over to screenerspodcast.com and let us know what you think. See you next time.